Dr. Anita Naravne. I often find that students get tied up in knots when it comes to the sympathetic nervous system. Through this video, I'm going to try to explain some of the basic concepts of this system. I'm going to describe the sympathetic nervous system, and as you know, it begins in the T1 to L2 segments of the spinal cord, and associated with the sympathetic nervous system are ganglia, which are present by the side of the vertebral column, which are known as the paravertebral ganglia. And then we have other ganglia which are related to the blood vessels which arise from the aorta, and these lie in front of the vertebral column, and these are known as prevertebral ganglia. In the pelvic area, the prevertebral ganglia are present as a separate set of ganglia which are known as the hypogastric ganglia. Now, all structures which have a blood supply receive sympathetic innervation, so that's something very important to remember. And then, with relation to these paravertebral ganglia, what you need to know is that they are connected to the spinal nerves, but in the cervical region you have only 3 ganglia, and these are the superior, middle and inferior cervical ganglia. In the thoracic region you have 11, 5 in the lumbar, sacral, and then they join up together to form a single ganglion which is known as the ganglion impar. So let's see how the pre and post ganglionic fibers behave. So from the T1 to L2 segments of the spinal cord, you'll have the origin of the fibers from the lateral horn of the spinal cord in the gray matter. So the fibers come out, so these are preganglionic, they travel out, they enter the ganglion in the white rami communicans, they synapse there, and then the postganglionic fiber will start and pass out through the gray ramus and go into a spinal nerve and be distributed to skin and sweat glands and erector pylorus muscle. Similarly, so that, let's say that was from L1, so from L2 they'll do the same thing, they'll pass out and go out. So we have white rami only between T1 to L2. Now how about the spinal nerves which are present in the cervical region or in the lumbar region? Here the fibers will come out, and instead of synapsing in the ganglion, they will travel up and then synapse in cervical ganglion and then pass out with the cervical nerves. And for the lumbar and sacral, they'll travel out like this, synapse in the ganglion below and then pass out and travel with the spinal nerves. Now for the face region, because there are no ganglia in the face area, in the head area, and the spinal nerves don't reach there, so what happens is that the nerves, so this happens on both sides, so I'm just showing it to you here. So these preganglionic fibers travel, come into this ganglion here, travel all the way up to the cervical ganglion, they synapse there, the postganglionic fibers emerge, and then they find this blood vessel which is the internal carotid and the external carotid, which lie very close to this area. So they travel with the branches of the internal carotid, or the branches, these are postganglionic, or the branches of the external carotid, and then go to supply the smooth muscle in the blood vessels, or any smooth muscle, for example in the eye. They supply the blood vessels in glands, for example the blood vessels of the parotid gland, or they supply the blood vessels in the skin area, the erector pylorus, and so on. So they use blood vessels to travel to the to take their postganglionic fibers to structures in the head area. How about the thorax? So in the thorax we have the lungs, the heart and the esophagus, and of course the trachea. So here the fibers begin, they travel in these, they come to these sympathetic ganglia in this area, they synapse there, And then the postganglionic fibers pass out. So we'll have postganglionic fibers which pass out, and these travel together and they go to these organs where they form a plexus. So they'll go to these organs. So you have a cardiac plexus. So I'm just showing it all together. So this will be the cardiac plexus. This will be this area here will be the pulmonary plexus, and this we can call the esophageal plexus. So you can see that they are forming a plexus around this area, and you will see these going across in the thoracic cavity. What about the organs which have to be supplied in the abdominal and pelvic area? So here the fibers pass through this, they begin in this area, they come into the ganglia and they pass out of the ganglia. So they're still preganglionic. So you have, a lot of them like this, which are known as the splanchnic nerves. So these are called the splanchnic nerves, and these are the greater, the lesser, and the least splanchnic nerve. So I'm only showing you one. So they go here, so they travel out like this. And what they do is they pierce this diaphragm, and then they come and synapse in these prevertebral ganglia. They'll come and synapse in the prevertebral ganglia. Then the postganglionic fibers begin from here, and they travel with the blood vessels and go to supply the organs. So in this case, you can see they are supplying the stomach. Now for the pelvic organs, the same thing happens. They come out, they'll travel through like this, and here they'll form what are known as pelvic splanchnic nerves. So we'll call these pelvic splanchnic nerves, and they will come to these hypogastric ganglia, synapse there, and postganglionic fibers will go to the pelvic organ. So here I'm just showing you the bladder. So this is the prostate gland, so in the male, so they'll go there. So that's how the organs in the abdominal and pelvic area are supplied. And lastly, the other thing that this preganglionic fibers can do is, so let's say we have the adrenal gland up here. So I'm going to draw it this side. So here is the kidney. So here is the kidney, and sitting on top of the kidney is the adrenal gland. So the preganglionic fibers, they pass out as these same splanchnic nerves. They pass out without synapsing, and they come and synapse on the adrenal gland in the medulla of the adrenal gland. So they synapse with cells there, and then those cells which are present in the gland, they act as postganglionic neurons, and they secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. So you don't have postganglionic fibers as such. Those cells themselves act as postganglionic neurons, and they secrete epinephrine and norepinephrine. So this is how the sympathetic pathway reaches all the structures. Now wherever you have plexuses in relation to these organs, what happens is that these plexuses are actually combinations. The cardiac plexus, the pulmonary plexus, the esophageal plexus up here, and then in relation to these plexuses in this area and even the hypogastric, these really are a combination of sympathetic and parasympathetic. So the sympathetic we've already seen. So how does the parasympathetic reach this area? So let me just erase some of this so that we make some space up here. So I'll erase this. So that was the pulmonary, this was the cardiac plexus, and I'm going to show you the parasympathetic in green. And the parasympathetic contribution below the neck area is through the vagus. So the cells begin in the brain. So here's the brain. So the cranial part of it. So cells begin in the brain. They travel with the vagus nerve, and the vagus passes through the neck area and enters into the thorax. And then when it comes into the thorax, the vagus gives branches which will join this cardiac plexus. So these are all still preganglionic. And then in the heart, they come and synapse on little ganglia which are present, and then the postganglionic fibers go to supply the cardiac muscle and everything. And then similarly in the pulmonary plexus, so they join up with these sympathetic, these are preganglionic, and they go and synapse with little ganglia which are present within the walls itself in the lung and the trachea, and then the postganglionic fibers supply the smooth muscle. Similarly for the esophagus, and we'll do this in greater detail, but in the esophagus again, that's what they do. So they travel with the plexus, go into the wall of the esophagus, and then synapse there, and postganglionic fibers go to supply the smooth muscle. So you can see that in parasympathetic, the postganglionic fibers are really short. The vagus continues down, passes through the diaphragm, and then it joins all these fibers which are going to the various organs in the abdomen, and then it synapses in the walls of these in the walls of these abdominal organs, and goes to supply the smooth muscle and glands in that area. In the sacral region, the parasympathetic comes from the sacral segments, the S2, 3, 4. So from this area it comes, and it travels as pelvic splanchnic nerves 2, goes into the takes part in the hypogastric plexus, travels with this, and then goes to synapse again with in ganglia which are present in the walls. So all of these plexuses that you will be encountering in the thoracic region, abdominal and pelvic, these are really a combination of parasympathetic and sympathetic, and that's very important for you to remember. The sympathetic is postganglionic in these plexuses. The parasympathetic is preganglionic because the synapse is in the walls of the organs. So I hope that explains this a little bit better. This has been a presentation by Dr. Anita Naravne of the St. Petersburg College.